The alarm echoed through the tight steel corridors of the USS Trident, a deep, resonant clang that pulsed through every bulkhead, every deck, every station. It was the kind of sound that sent adrenaline spiking and turned disciplined sailors into tight-jawed professionals in an instant. Commander Sullivan stood in the control room, his eyes sharp, his jaw set, his mind calculating 1,000 variables as he watched his crew scramble into position. He'd been a submariner for over 18 years, but the sudden wail of the alarm still sent a chill down his spine. "Status report," he barked, his voice cutting through the clamor like a blade. Seaman Brooks, just 19, fresh out of basic, his uniform, still crisp, his movement still a fraction too fast, a touch too eager, turned from his console. "Sir, we've got a power fluctuation in the forward ballast tanks. Temperature spike and pressure drop, rapid." Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. Those tanks are sealed." Brooks's hands shook as he tapped at his console, his eyes darting across the rapidly scrolling data. "Confirmed, sir. Internal sensors show a 15-degree rise in the last 30 seconds, pressure dropping by 10 psi. Sullivan stepped forward, his boots ringing on the metal deck. He leaned over Brooks's shoulder, his eyes scanning the chaotic mess of numbers and flashing lights on the monitor. "Shut it down," he ordered. "Isolate the tanks, purge the system." Brooks's fingers flew over the keys, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. He keyed in the override command, his heart hammering in his chest. The screen flashed red. "Override rejected. Manual access required." Brooks felt his blood run cold. He looked up at Sullivan, his face pale. "Sir, the system's locked." "Me out." Sullivan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening. "That's not possible." Minutes later, Sullivan, Brooks, and a small team of engineers were clambering down the narrow ladder shafts to the forward ballast tanks, the metal rungs cold and slick beneath their gloved hands. The air grew colder as they descended, the temperature dropping as they approached the forward compartments. The lights flickered, the metal walls creaking softly as the sub adjusted to the shifting pressures. They reached the sealed hatch leading to the forward ballast control room. Sullivan keyed in his command code, his eyes hard, his jaw set. The side door hissed open, a burst of frigid air washing over them, the lights inside flickering, the consoles buzzing with static. Brooks hesitated on the threshold, his heart racing, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. "Move," Sullivan growled, his hand on Brooks's shoulder, propelling him into the room. The air was freezing, their breaths misting in the flickering light, the metal walls slick with condensation. The control panel at the far end of the room was a mess of blinking lights and scrolling error messages. Sullivan moved to the panel, his gloved hands flying over the keys, his eyes narrowing as the screen filled with lines of code, strings of numbers, garbled text. "This isn't a malfunction," he muttered, his breath fogging the air. "This is a command override." Brooks stepped closer, his eyes wide, his pulse hammering in his ears. "Sir, what does that mean?" Sullivan's jaw tightened. "It means someone's trying to take control of my sub." Back on the bridge, the rest of the crew was tense, their eyes locked on their screens, their fingers hovering over their controls. Lieutenant Ortiz, the sonar chief, leaned forward, her brow furrowing as a new signal blipped on her screen. "Sir," she whispered into her headset, "we've got movement. Small, metallic, 500 meters to starboard, moving fast." The XO turned, his face pale. "Enemy contact?" Ortiz's fingers danced over the keys, her eyes locked on the screen. "No, sir. No active sonar, no propulsion noise. Just drifting." The XO's jaw tightened. "Keep tracking it. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." Ortiz swallowed, her heart racing. "Aye, sir." Back in the forward ballast control room, Sullivan's mind raced, his fingers flying over the console, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps as he tried to lock down the compromised systems. Brooks stood beside him, his hands shaking, his eyes wide, his heart hammering in his chest. "Sir, what do we do?" Sullivan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as he keyed in a final override command. "We find whoever did this." The screen flickered, the lights in the compartment dimming, the air growing colder, the metal walls groaning as the sub adjusted to the shifting pressures. Then the screen filled with a single line of text, the words flashing in bright, angry red. "Hello, Commander." Brooks took a step back, his breath catching in his throat, his eyes wide with terror. Sullivan's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides, his breath coming in harsh, ragged bursts, his mind racing. "Get back to the bridge," he growled. His eyes locked on the screen, his mind racing, his heart hammering in his chest. Brooks hesitated, his pulse pounding in his ears, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. "But sir, now..." Brooks turned and fled, his boots ringing on the metal deck, his heart racing, his mind spinning. Sullivan stared at the screen, his jaw set, his eyes hard. "I don't know who you are," he whispered, his breath fogging the air, his heart hammering in his chest. "But you just made a very big mistake." The screen flickered, the red text blinking in and out of focus, the lights flickering, the metal walls creaking as the sub adjusted to the shifting pressures. Then the screen filled with a new line of text. "I'm not the one who made a mistake," Sullivan's fists clenched, his breath coming in harsh, ragged bursts, his jaw tightening, his mind racing. "Then let's see who breaks first." Here is the second part of your submarine story, continuing the tense confrontation between Commander Sullivan and the mysterious intruder. The metal walls of the USS Trident creaked as it cut through the dark, crushing depths of the Pacific. The cold, recycled air felt thicker, heavier, every breath tinged with the sharp, metallic taste of fear. Sullivan's mind raced as he strode down the narrow metal corridors, his boots ringing on the grated deck, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. If the signal was coming from inside his sub, that meant only one thing: someone on board had betrayed him. Someone had broken the sacred trust of the crew, violated the unspoken bond that held every submariner together. And Sullivan would find them. He reached the control room, the doors hissing open as he stepped inside. The crew looked up, their faces pale, their eyes wide, their breaths coming in sharp, shallow gasps. "Report!" Sullivan barked, his voice cutting through the tense silence like a blade. Ortiz turned from her console, her fingers still dancing. Over the keys, her eyes locked on the flickering screens. "Sir, the signal is bouncing between multiple nodes. It's not just one source, it's a network." Sullivan's jaw tightened. "A network? How the hell did someone build a network on my sub without me knowing?" Ortiz's fingers froze over the keys, her eyes wide, her breath catching in her throat. "Sir," she whispered, her voice trembling, her breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. I think it's been here all along." Silence fell over the control room, broken only by the low, steady hum of the engines and the faint, rhythmic creak of the hull as the sub descended deeper into the darkness. Sullivan's fists clenched, his jaw tightening, his mind racing. "Shut it down," he growled, his voice low, his eyes locked on the flickering screens. "Shut it all down." Ortiz's fingers flew over the keys, her breaths coming faster, sharper, her heart racing in her chest. "Sir, if I do that, we'll lose control of propulsion, navigation, everything." Sullivan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening, his fists clenching at his sides. "Then we do it manually, one compartment at a time. Rip every wire, every relay, every circuit if we have to." Ortiz hesitated, her breath catching in her throat, her eyes wide, her fingers trembling over the keys. "Sir, if this network is as deep as it seems, it could trigger a failsafe. It could sink us." Sullivan's jaw tightened, his breath coming in harsh, ragged bursts, his mind racing. "Then we find the source and cut the head off this snake before it strikes." They moved quickly, a small team of the most trusted officers, their boots ringing on the metal deck as they descended into the lower compartments. The air grew colder as they went deeper, the lights flickering, the walls creaking, the metal grates slick with condensation. Sullivan's mind raced, his heart hammering in his chest, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. Whoever had done this had to be someone he trusted, someone who knew the sub as well as he did, someone who had been with him for years, who had earned his respect, his loyalty. He reached the communications relay room, the door hissing open as he stepped inside, the lights flickering, the air cold and sharp, the metal walls streaked with rust. He moved to the main control panel, his gloved hands flying over the keys, his eyes narrowing as the screens filled with lines of code, strings of numbers, garbled text. Then he saw it. A single line of code, buried deep in the sub's operating system, hidden in the emergency override protocols. "Hello, Marcus." Sullivan's fists clenched, his breath coming in harsh, ragged bursts, his jaw tightening, his mind racing. "Show yourself," he growled, his eyes locked on the flickering screen, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. "Face me." The screen flickered, the text stuttering, the lights flickering, the air growing colder, the metal walls creaking as the sub groaned under the crushing pressure of the deep. Then a face appeared on the screen. A face Sullivan hadn't seen in years. A face he thought he'd left behind on the cold, dark floor of the Atlantic. The face of a dead man. The crew froze, their breaths catching in their throats, their eyes wide, their hearts hammering in their chests. The face on the screen grinned, its teeth bared, its eyes wide, its skin pale and sunken, its hair wild and matted. "Hello, Marcus," the voice crackled through the speakers, the sound sharp and metallic, tinged with a faint mechanical echo. Sullivan's blood ran cold, his fists clenching at his sides, his breath coming in harsh, ragged bursts, his mind racing. "No," he whispered, his eyes wide, his jaw tightening, his heart hammering in his chest. "You're dead. I saw you go down." The face on the screen laughed, the sound harsh and ragged, the speakers crackling with static, the lights flickering, the air growing colder, the metal walls creaking as the sub groaned under the crushing pressure of the deep. "Did you?" the face whispered, its eyes narrowing, its grin widening. "Or did you just tell yourself that to sleep at night?" Sullivan's fists clenched, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps, his jaw tightening, his mind racing. "What do you want?" he growled, his voice low, his eyes locked on the flickering screen, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. The face on the screen leaned closer, its eyes wide, its grin fading, its expression hardening. "I want to finish what we started." The screen went black. Silence filled the control room, broken only by the low, steady hum of the engines, the distant creak of the hull, the sharp, shallow breaths of the terrified crew. Sullivan straightened, his eyes hard, his jaw set, his mind racing. This wasn't just a ghost. This was a reckoning. Here is the third part of your submarine story, continuing the intense mission as the crew confronts the unknown. The cold, crushing blackness of the Pacific surrounded them, the faint glow of their helmet lights slicing through the endless dark. Harper's breathing echoed in his helmet, each exhale a foggy puff against the glass. Ahead, the cylindrical habitat loomed, a ghostly silhouette on the seafloor, its surface scarred and rust-streaked, like a long-forgotten relic of a war no one remembered. Ashford's voice crackled in his earpiece. "Form up. Approach slow. No sudden movements." Harper adjusted his buoyancy, his gloved hands tightening around the grip of his underwater cutting torch. The others formed a line behind Ashford, their lights flickering across the curved hull of the habitat as they approached. The structure was about 20 feet long, 6 feet in diameter, with a reinforced airlock at one end. A small viewport stared back at them, black and unblinking. Ashford reached the airlock first. He placed his gloved hand on the exterior panel, brushing away a layer of silt and grime. Harper held his breath as Ashford typed in a code, 6 digits, rapid and confident. The airlock clicked, then hissed, a small cloud of bubbles escaping as the hatch cracked open. They drifted inside, one by one, their helmet lights casting long, eerie shadows on the interior walls. The inside of the habitat was cramped and cold metal walls beaded with condensation, the air sharp and stale. The soft hum of life support thrummed through the structure, a low, steady pulse that vibrated through Harper's bones. Ashford moved forward, his head swiveling left and right as he took in the surroundings. The walls were lined with consoles, screens, and diagnostic panels, most of them dark, their surfaces coated in a thin film of moisture. A small cot was bolted to one wall, the thin gray blanket neatly folded. Then Harper saw it, a helmet. Resting on the cot, its visor cracked, the glass smeared with dried blood. Ashford's gloved hand reached for it, turning it over slowly. The name stenciled on the side made Harper's heart skip a beat. Griggs. Ashford's jaw tightened. I knew it. Harper's mind raced. Griggs. The missing commander. The ghost. The man who'd vanished without a trace 6 months ago. His sub declared lost with all hands. Ashford set the helmet down and moved to the main console, his fingers flying over the keys. The screens flickered to life, green text scrolling across their surfaces, lines of code, status reports, power logs. "Sir," Harper whispered, his voice trembling. "This place, it's active. Someone's been living here." Ashford didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the screen, his jaw clenched. The screen blinked once, twice, then settled on a single line of text. "Welcome." "Back, Michael." Harper felt his stomach drop. Ashford cursed under his breath, his fingers still moving over the keys, his breaths coming faster, harsher. "What is this?" Harper whispered. "Sir, what is this place?" Ashford's voice was tight, strained. "This is the reason Griggs disappeared. The reason they've been watching us." He turned, his eyes hard behind the visor of his helmet. "This is a listening post, a black site, a ghost ship with a single purpose." Harper's heart pounded in his ears. What purpose? Ashford's eyes narrowed. To test loyalty. Back on the Archer, Reese paced the control room, his eyes flicking to the sonar screen every few seconds, his mind racing. He knew something was wrong. The habitat had gone dark the moment Ashford and the others had entered, its signal vanishing from the passive scan. "Re-establish contact," he snapped at the comms officer. "Patch me through to the boarding team." "No response, sir," the officer replied, his voice tight. Their comms went dark as soon as they breached the airlock. Reese swore under his breath, his fists clenching at his sides. Inside the habitat, Ashford had reached E, the final line of code. He hit enter, his breath catching as the screen blinked, then filled with a single image. A face, a man, gaunt, hollow-eyed, with a scruffy beard and a twisted smile. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, his cheeks hollow. Harper's blood ran cold. "Griggs," Ashford whispered. The image flickered, then began to move. Griggs leaned forward, his face filling the screen, his eyes wide, his teeth bared in a crazed grin. "Hello, Michael," he said, his voice crackling through the speakers. "Did you miss me?" Harper took a step back, his heart hammering in his chest, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Griggs's voice filled the small metal room, the speakers crackling with every syllable. "I knew you'd come," he said, his eyes boring into Ashford's through the screen. "I knew you'd follow the breadcrumbs. I knew you couldn't resist." Ashford's fists clenched. "What is this, Griggs? What the hell have you done?" Griggs's grin widened, his eyes glinting with madness. "I did what you were too afraid to do," he spat. "I broke free. I broke the chain. I tore down the walls of this floating prison." Ashford's teeth ground together. "You murdered your own crew." Griggs laughed, the sound harsh and ragged. "They were weak. They weren't ready for the truth. But you were always different, Michael. You had the will to see it through, to make the hard choices, to burn the bridges and never look back. The screen flickered, Griggs's face twisting, distorting. But you're still a slave, a puppet, a cog in the machine. Ashford's jaw tightened. I'm nothing like you. Griggs's eyes narrowed, his grin fading. Then prove it. The screen cut to black. Silence filled the small metal room, the only sound the steady thrum of the life support system. Ashford straightened, his hands shaking, his breaths coming in harsh, ragged bursts. He turned to Harper, his eyes cold and hard. We're leaving. Harper swallowed, his heart racing, his mind spinning. Sir, what was that? Ashford didn't respond. He simply turned, pushed open the TIA airlock and stepped into the darkness beyond. Here is the fourth and final part of your submarine story, bringing the intense mission to a dramatic conclusion. Commander Ashford didn't speak as they made their way back to the Archer. The only sounds were the steady hiss of their oxygen, tanks and the gentle, rhythmic thrum of their thrusters as they propelled themselves through the dark, icy water. Harper's mind raced. Griggs was alive. Not just alive, but watching them, manipulating them, testing them. The helmet with his name, the hidden code, the cryptic messages. It had all been part of a twisted game. As they approached the sub's airlock, Ashford grabbed Harper's arm, his grip tight, his eyes fierce behind the visor of his helmet. Listen to me, Ashford said, his voice crackling through the comms. When we get back on board, you say nothing. Understood? Harper blinked. But sir, the crew, nothing. Ashford's voice was steel. Not one word. Do you understand me? Harper swallowed, his throat tight. Yes, sir. Ashford released him, then turned and punched in the airlock code. The heavy metal hatch creaked open, seawater rushing in as the pressure equalized. They drifted inside, the door clanging shut behind them. The small compartment filled with a low mechanical hum as the water drained away, the pressure equalizing, the air slowly warming. As the inner hatch unlocked, Ashford shoved his helmet off, his jaw tight, his eyes hard. Harper hesitated, his heart still hammering in his chest. He wanted to say something, to ask 1,000 questions, but the look in Ashford's eyes stopped him. Not now. Not here. The inner hatch clanged open, and they stepped back into the narrow metal corridors of the Archer. Reese was waiting for them, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed. Sir, he said, his voice low, we've got a problem. Ashford's jaw tightened. What now? Reese led them to the control room, the metal grates clanging under their boots, the air thick with tension. On the main display, a single line of text blinked in harsh green letters. Welcome back, Michael. Ashford's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening. Shut it down, he growled. Reese hesitated. Sir, it's not just a message. It's a command. It's overriding our systems. Ashford's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Reese pointed to the screen. The habitat wasn't just a listening post. It was a control node. It's been feeding false data into our systems, our sonar, our comms, our navigation. It's been guiding us. Harper's blood ran cold. Guiding us where? Reese's face was pale. To the Mariana Trench. The room fell into a tense, stunned silence. Ashford's mind raced. The trench, the deepest point in the world's oceans. The place where no sub could survive for long, where pressure crushed metal like paper, where light and sound died, swallowed by the cold, black void. He turned to Reese. Shut it down, now. Reese's fingers flew over the console, his breaths coming in sharp, panicked bursts. The screen flickered, the green text stuttering, then freezing. You can't hide, Michael. Ashford felt his blood run cold. Override the controls, he barked. Manual lockout. Cut the power to every secondary system. Reese's fingers shook as he typed in the commands. The lights flickered, the hum of the engines shuddering as the sub's systems reset. The green text disappeared, the screen going dark. Ashford let out a long, slow breath, his heart hammering in his chest. Then the alarms blared. Every screen lit up, red text scrolling across the consoles, the speakers crackling with harsh, distorted static. Engine failure, coolant breach, hull integrity compromised. Harper staggered back, his eyes wide, his heart racing. "Sir, what's happening?" Ashford's jaw tightened. "He's still in our systems. He's still controlling us." Reese's eyes were wide, his fingers shaking as he typed in command after command, trying to regain control. "I can't shut it down," he whispered, his face pale. "He's locked us out." Ashford slammed his fist into the bulkhead, his jaw clenched, his mind racing. Then a new message blinked onto the screen. "Only one way out, Michael." Ashford's fists clenched, his breath coming in harsh, ragged bursts. Then the screen went black. Silence filled the control room, broken only by the distant hum of the engines, the low mechanical thrum of the life support systems. Ashford straightened, his eyes hard, his jaw set. "Reese," he said, his voice low and steady. "Prepare to surface. Full power to the engines. We're getting out of here." Reese hesitated. "But sir, the trench—" "I said full power." Reese nodded, his fingers flying over the console, the lights flickering as the engines roared to life, the sub groaning as it began to rise, the hull creaking under the sudden pressure change. Ashford turned to Harper, his eyes cold. "Get to your station, now." Harper swallowed, his throat tight, his heart pounding in his chest. "Yes, sir." As the Archer clawed its way toward the surface, the screens flickered again, the red text blinking in and out of focus. "You can't escape. You're mine, Michael. Welcome back." Ashford didn't flinch. He simply stared at the screen, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. Then he reached down, grabbed the nearest console and ripped it from the wall, the wires sparking, the metal shrieking as it tore free. The screens went dark, the alarms falling silent. Ashford straightened, his breaths coming in harsh, ragged bursts. "We're going home," he whispered. Leadership isn't just about making the right call. It's about facing the darkness, standing your ground, and refusing to be controlled, even when the pressure is crushing you from all sides. In the silence, beneath the sea, the only thing that keeps a crew together is trust. And sometimes the greatest enemy is the voice in your own head. What would you have done in Commander Ashford's place? Would you face the unknown or turn back? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more real-world inspired stories of loyalty, command, and courage, subscribe to Authority Watch. We surface the truth, no matter how deep it hides.